The Comedy Cellar live from the table is brought to you by Sheath Underwear. If you want to support the show and get 20% off your order, head over to sheathunderwear.com/cellar. Code CELLAR for 20% off your first order. That's sheathunderwear.com/cellar. Code CELLAR. This is Live from the Table, the official podcast of the world-famous Comedy Cellar, coming at you on Sirius XM 99 Raw Comedy. Also available wherever you get your podcasts. Dan Naturman here. I've been away. I was in Paris. I was on a cruise in Alaska. I got to make a living. What am I going to do? This podcast doesn't pay much. Anyway, I'm here with Noam Dworman. Does pay a little bit. I'm here with Noam Dworman. He's the owner of the Comedy Cellar. He'll be going away soon, too. He's going to Japan. He's going to Maine.
I'm going to Japan. I can't wait. Are you coming to Maine this year?
It's only 2 weeks. It's a little too rushed.
Okay.
Anyway.
Are you coming?
We have to talk about
Okay,
that.
go ahead.
We have with us, Periel Aschenbrand is here too, I should mention. We have with us Ross Barkan. He's been on the show before. He's a novelist and a journalist from NYC, New York City, the Big Apple. A contributing writer to the New York Times Magazine, and his reporting and essays have appeared in a wide variety of publications. Be on the lookout for his next novel, Glass Century. Sounds intriguing. It'll be published in 2025, and he's writing a book about American politics and the 2024 elections. Welcome back to the show, Ross Barkan. Yay!
Yay. Thank you for having me. What were you doing in Paris? Were you being paid to be there? Or
I was being paid. Well, no, I was doing shows there. Our dear friend Aruba Ray Ellen has expanded from the Caribbean to Europe, and he's producing shows now in Paris.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, you didn't know that?
Don't tell Esty. She's going to be really upset.
I think Esty knows.
He infuriates her. She's our booker. She views any comedy show anywhere on planet Earth as direct competition.
Well, I think she knows already.
That's amazing.
He really does.
That's amazing.
I think she knows already. But in any case, that's where I was. I was in Paris, France.
And I was so excited for him, being that he speaks French, everything, and he's been so just blah. I was like, Dan, how is Paris? Bienvenue.
I have a few questions for Ross before we what? But how? Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, Noam doesn't wish to talk
What does
about
bienvenue
Paris.
mean?
It was welcome.
It means welcome home. I was.
Yeah.
It doesn't
that's
mean
what I thought.
welcome
That's- I
home. It
thought
means
it-
welcome.
Okay, but he's home.
Yeah.
So
He had nothing. He had nothing for
No,
me.
it's
did you get
fine.
lucky?
No, I didn't.
Did you strike out?
I did neither of the above. I didn't make. I didn't.
Are you out of the game?
Not out of the game. I just.
Usually you hit your legs, your shoes on a foreign soil. It's invigorating.
No, it didn't. I'm not making a great effort. I'm not out of the game, but nor do I make quite the effort. That I never really made that huge an effort. But
Wear that sheath underwear.
okay.
That's our response. Can we talk to
Yes,
Ross?
yes.
Okay,
Ross Barkan is joining.
So
us.
now that we've gotten to know Ross, first of all, I thought you were coming to hang out last weekend. What happened?
Last weekend, what was last weekend?
I thought you were coming down on the 27th or something. You were going to come down to the club. Anyway,
No. I don't think I was in Chicago, and then I was in the Midwest. So I don't think I was in New York at that time.
Okay. First question is, you're writing for the Times now?
I contribute to them. Yes, I write magazine pieces for them. I have one coming out hopefully in a couple of weeks.
When did that start?
Last January, so January of 2023.
Well, I didn't realize that. That's a huge thing, right? That's a big congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I've contributed to them for a little bit, and then I have now a contributing contract with them, which means you do a certain number of pieces per year for the magazine. So I did one earlier this year on Israel and democratic politics, and now I have another one coming in a few weeks ahead of the Democratic Convention. So I'm excited about that.
Now, this has been the story of my life that I have, and the same thing happened with you. I've read things by relatively unknown or little known people and said, oh, that guy's smart. And then seen them in short order have their careers mushroom. That happened with Harry Enton and Coleman Hughes. I mean, they were somewhat known, but I really took to them with the people who work at Fire, Greg Lukianoff. I don't mean that any of them were that unknown, but they were certainly not anywhere. And I was like, everyone. And I first read Ross when he was skewering Andrew Cuomo about his COVID response, when Ross and I were the only two people in America that thought this guy was out to lunch and kind of a phony. Although I would say I I would vote for him for president today.
Yeah.
Even with all that.
Yeah.
But anyway, so much is happening
So much.
in such a short amount of time. I don't know what you want to talk about first. You want to
I'm
talk
game
about
for anything, whatever.
Okay. Let's
cooking.
talk about first Kamala Harris.
Yes. So
So what's your take on all that? Are you surprised at the overnight sensation? Are you surprised?
yeah. Am I surprised? So we'll back up and say the Biden debate failure did not shock me because I had been for a long time writing that Biden should not run again and he was too old and he was clearly slipping and making these very clear mistakes in public that were being massaged or covered up to a degree, but just almost de-emphasized. So
Well, let's stop there.
yes.
What do you attribute? How nefarious, how malign were the intentions of the people
Yeah.
who were denying it, and how much of it was a really wonderful illustration of how bias blinds people?
Yeah. It's a good question because it's one I've been thinking about a lot. You know, I write a Substack and I did a piece a little bit after the debate, sort of like ignorance versus deception. You know, was it ignorance or was it active nefarious deception on the part of the Democratic establishment and the mainstream media and how they interacted? And the answer is it's a bit of all of the above. I think you had a lot of groupthink. You had a lot of pundits. You know, I think of like a Matt Iglesias type who wrote that in his sort of mea culpa after the debate, he said, well, you know, I thought a lot of it was Republican disinformation. I realized it was more than that. So I think you had people genuinely blinded and just sort of falling prey to groupthink, and that's very bad. I think you definitely had people, you know, politicians and operatives in the Democratic establishment actively covering for Biden, certainly his own campaign. And, you know, you had a media that really, you know, certainly I think failed at its job. And you had some pieces about him. You know, I remember when he said his son Bo, who died of brain cancer, died in Iraq, and he said that several times.
Yes.
And each time it would get covered, but it would never get emphasized. And then you'd have someone come out and say, well, you know, he meant that he got sick there, but then he died of brain cancer. You'd get all these
In the
kind
tar
of
pits. It was in the tar pits.
the tar pits, right? So you know, there was the time he called out to a congresswoman who had died not long ago. He shouted her out at a press event, and you could just see in the way he spoke. I mean, he was not coherent any longer. He was getting older in 2020, and then he'd really by I'd say 22 slipped a lot. So given all that, I did not expect him to step aside and actually there be this pressure campaign from Democratic donors and politicians to successfully get him to step aside. I was surprised at the swiftness of everything. It almost felt like this switch had been flipped where on June 27th, going into the debate, everyone said, oh, Biden's not too old. It's Republican lies. And all of a sudden he was exposed as kind of like the emperor has no clothes moment. And suddenly there's this almost mass effort on part of the leaders of the Democratic Party, the Nancy Pelosi's of the world, and then you have the donors. And I do think the donors played a big role in it too. The fact that Hollywood elites and Wall Street elites both said, listen, we're not going to keep giving this Biden campaign money any longer if he stays on the top of the ticket. And I think Biden stayed as long as he could. He wanted to stay, but the pressure was too great. And he's polling badly against Trump. I mean, he really was looking like he was going to lose. So you take all that together in a really one of the most surreal stretches that I can remember in American politics, from the debate to the Trump assassination attempt to then July 21st, Biden says he's stepping down. I'd gone to the Republican convention just the week before, and it was sort of like this Trump Super Bowl. And there was such great, you know, Trump sanctified. It was a remarkable event to see so many people so excited for one human being just to be alive and to be doing things.
Oh, Donald.
And to go from that, and then literally that Sunday, the convention ends Thursday. Sunday, Biden announces he's stepping down. And then you have what New York Magazine, where I write from time to time, has called Camelot, which I actually love that front page, Camelot. So this sort of outpouring, this sort of entirely striking ascension of a politician who's been quite flawed and had a checkered political career.
Let's cut it up into pieces because
we'll
there's
do it.
so
It's
much here.
There's so much to.
So first of all,
Yes.
we had predicted here very accurately what was going to happen at that debate.
Yeah.
There's a clip of me on Twitter where I said that all the rules are going to work in Trump's favor.
Yeah.
And it all happened almost exactly as I said. It was clear that he was out of it. Like, well, we don't really even know now how far out of it he is. But what was clear to me was that too many times we saw him out of sync with the rest of the room. Everybody's looking this way, he's looking that way. Everybody's looking that way, he's looking this way. And when Obama took him by the hand, that was such an obvious dynamic playing itself out. Like it was obvious to me when I saw that. I commented on Obama knows that he's not well, because you don't take the president of the United States by the hand if you think he's fine. You say, "Hey, Joe," or you let him wait as long as he wants. He's the fucking president.
Yeah.
You don't rush him off the stage. If he's out there, if he's looking at people, how dare you, right? And he took him in a like he was his son, So it was obvious. But what I'm getting to is this: what bothers me is that the people who saw clearly, like you, are not elevated as they should be, and starkly against the people who got it wrong. The people who got this wrong and dug in on it, they should suffer some consequences. They should not just be able to wake up the next morning, well, now listen to me about these 5 things.
Yes.
They've demonstrated to the world that I cannot see clearly. And I get paid, by the way, to see clearly. And I flunked. I flunked the most obvious test. Every idiot knew this was true but me.
Yes.
And not only did I not know it was true, I called them names. I told you they were frauds. They were editing. They were this. And then I go back to work the next day, and this is bad for our system. So go ahead.
It was a few thoughts on that. One, it was an example of common sense and common wisdom being stronger than the punditry and stronger than those supposedly in the know. You look at poll after poll after poll for years on end. Democrats were saying it, certainly Republicans were, Biden is too old to run. And this majority of voters, majority of Democrats felt this way for years. So the regular person, you ask them on the street, oh, what do you think of an 81-year-old president? Someone who'd be 86 when he finished his second term. That's crazy. That's nuts. My late father, who's 83, when he passed, and we talked about this one of the last topics we discussed, and he thought it was insane Biden was running again. He's in his 80s. He can't do it. In terms of those who should suffer, I tend to agree with you. I'll say this. My experience is they won't and don't. And the formative event for me was the Iraq War, where you had an entire pundit class coming out in favor of it, pushing it, arguing for it. Jeffrey Goldberg now running The Atlantic. You had David Remnick now running The New Yorker, George Packer. Every sort of prestige name in media almost was in favor of this disastrous war, and their careers were completely unaffected. So, this Biden...
This is worse, though, because they were going on information, they were garbage in, garbage out.
Right.
This was right before their eyes.
You could, it's a fair... one, you could say more destructive, but in terms of what was a worse judgment call? You could argue, yes, that believing Biden was mentally and physically competent to seek a second term was completely absurd. And if you paid attention, and I wrote this too, thinking about the ignorance versus the deception, what's worse? Is it actively knowing he is incompetent but pushing for it anyway, or is it being so ignorant and so having so fallen prey to groupthink that you earnestly think that you are that much of an intellectual failure, right? And that's it's bad, but no one. It is amazing. Again, switches get flipped. It was Biden can do this. Biden is fine. No, Biden's got to go. That switch was flipped. Now we're on to Kamala Harris. She's here, and that's it. And we celebrate, or if you don't like her, you don't celebrate. But it's like the entire Biden chapter has just been thrown out. So yeah, it is remarkable. But.
I heard people like David Brooks telling Sam Harris that this was, Biden's lost a little on his fastball, but he's made it up in wisdom. As a matter of fact, this is working for him because he's slowed down a little bit, so he's more thoughtful. I've spent time with the president. I mean, it makes your head spin.
Is it possible
insane.
that he was having an off night? He was not feeling well. He had a
if
cold.
that was the only night. No, it's come out since then. Like Carl Bernstein reported, they've had 15 or 20 incidents prior.
Yes.
Where he froze up.
I mean, a guy to think about is Dean Phillips, this little-known congressman from Minnesota, ran against Biden for president on the premise that Biden was too old to serve again. He was completely ostracized. He got no votes. He was shut out of. There were no debates in the primary, and now he was proven correct. And Dean Phillips isn't getting any rewards. And I read an interview with him where he said, listen, like, I decided to do this because I met with Biden along with other members of Congress to discuss legislation a few years ago, and I knew he had slipped and he couldn't do this anymore. But
there was one thing I always respected about Bill O'Reilly, of all people, as opposed to what you're saying. So in the 2012 election, Dick Morris, I don't know if you
Yes.
was a regular
yes,
contributor on the O'Reilly show.
yes,
And he was there with his polls, and Dick Morris obviously was a reputable political voice, and he convinced everybody that Romney was going to win.
yes.
And then Romney didn't win. And you never saw Dick Morris on that show again. O'Reilly just cut him off at the legs. And I said, well, good for him. You know, that, and I respected that. And you don't see that on Fox anymore. I mean, that chapter of Fox is gone. But that was kind of the way O'Reilly was. And I want to see that somewhere. I want someone to say, no, you're out of here. We need people at the top of their game. All right. So then I have a tweet here that because I like to talk about, listen, it's not just that I want to be right. I think, and I'm pretty sure you're the same. If I start getting stuff wrong, I say to myself, well, I'm getting stuff wrong. I have no right to an opinion anymore. I mean, I can very empirically demonstrate to myself whether I'm onto stuff or I'm an idiot.
Or you feel shame. I feel shame.
Yeah, you feel shame, and then you really want to figure out
Why did you get it wrong?
And I'm not just saying it. I mean, you know me well enough. Right? Funny, we claim that we have different points of view. That you're a leftist and I'm a right, but we actually disagree on not that much. But when Biden was not yet pulling out, somebody from Commentary Magazine tweeted this Emerson College poll, and it's showing the potential matchups of Harris versus Trump, Sanders versus Trump, Newsom versus Trump, Buttigieg versus Whitmer, all the, and Trump was wiping the floor with all of them. And the tweet was, here we have why Biden won't quit the race. Mm-hmm. And I tweeted back, this is July 24th.
Yeah.
These polls are meaningless. The exuberance, the hagiographic coverage, the slingshot of pessimism to optimism, they will change overnight.
Yeah. Yeah, that's correct.
100% correct. But that's what happened, right?
Yes.
Did you see that coming?
I did. I
believe you did.
I did because I thought there'd be great relief if Biden left the ticket and Harris would get this honeymoon period, which she is getting. And of course, at some point, the honeymoon period ends. But I thought at the very minimum, the Democratic base would be thrilled to see someone who could really coherently make the case against Trump. Biden could not. He was not capable of going out on the campaign trail, talking to the press, talking to regular people, and holding events and doing all this. Biden skipped the Super Bowl interview. I mean, this was remarkable. Every year, it's a tradition. The president sits at the Super Bowl, talks to the broadcasters. It's very easy. Trump did it. Obama did it. It's something you do. You get a mass audience. It's
right.
Cute. Biden didn't even do that. So I think there was this real happiness and relief that, okay, we have a replacement level candidate at the very minimum who's going to be running in this race instead of Biden, who is below replacement level because he can't do it.
There's another aspect to it, and I didn't write it, but I was thinking at the time, and it's an indictment of the press. The other part of it was what we just spoke about. After what we just saw, where either intentionally or unintentionally, you, the press, circled the wagons around, Joe Biden for all this time. You expect me to believe when a new candidate steps in there, you're going to somehow give them a hard time? Every aspect of what you just did makes it a certainty that you're going to elevate this new candidate to levels that they've never been at before, because that's what you were protecting Biden. That's like, we have evidence now about the press and their bias in a way that we can no longer pretend otherwise. It's very serious. Of course, if we had a press, they'd write about it. But they won't write about it.
Yeah.
But I mean, this is not a political point of view. I'm saying, but it's an empirical fact.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting. I mean, you had the period of Biden protection, and then that did end after the debate, and there was all those brutal stories that I guess were sort of kept under wraps or suppressed suddenly come flooding out.
Well, they decided they were going to kill the king, and they're not going to miss, right? And they didn't miss.
Yes. So, I think. It's very interesting to think about that dynamic. I mean, I do think, given the length of time that's still left in the campaign, Harris, the tougher coverage will come once sort of this golden period passes. It won't last completely. I do think also, given the flaws of the Republican ticket now with Trump and Vance,
that's
there's a lot of
get to.
There's grist for the mill. I think if they had a more disciplined ticket, if it was like a Rubio, Doug Burgum ticket, right, and they were sort of just very conventional and running a normal campaign, you probably, I don't know if the honeymoon period would last this long, because they would be kind of, staying on course, and perhaps there would be more attention sooner paid to Harris. But I do think, given JD Vance in particular, there's grist for that mill, and there's fodder, and that's something the Republicans have to deal with.
So let's cut to the scene. So we're doing Biden, now we cut the movie. Donald Trump. He gets almost assassinated.
Yeah.
We could just digress for a minute. Do you have any thoughts about the entire Secret Service failure there?
It was a tremendous failure. Absolutely. It's something we need to know a lot more about. Certainly, Cheadle's resignation is the beginning of that. I do think one positive thing I'll say, it seems like there's a bipartisan effort to get to the bottom of this. You saw AOC asking tough questions in that hearing. You saw Republicans asking tough questions. So I do think there is this genuine desire to find out, how did this kid climb up onto this building and get the shot off, and what was it seemed like, certainly it was a Secret Service failure. It was odd that the perimeter didn't extend to this building that seemed like it was local law enforcement tasked with
you reject all conspiracy theories, right?
What I'll say is, my view of conspiracy theories in general is I'm more of an Occam's razor person, where usually most events can be explained by incompetency,
certainly when
and
Periel
stupidity and chaos, than active scheming in back rooms, men huddling together, coming up with these, very intricate plans that are going to be executed just perfectly. I think there's a lot of chaos in the world. I think there's a lot of fuck ups in the world.
Well, we saw October 7th in Israel. That ought to be enough to tell
security.
you that.
Yeah, security failure, right? I mean, 9/11 was security. If we had better airport security, there's no 9/11, right? I mean, or you'd lock the cockpits. There's no 9/11.
But I do have a question about. I reject the idea that this was a plot.
I guess
outright.
Would it be the Democrats plotting to get Trump killed? Would that be the conspiracy theory?
If you listen to various crazy podcasts. But I do wonder about this. One of like the guiding lessons of my life, one of the wisdoms I hope to impart to my children, because I think it's very important to understand this in life, and it's not a cliche, is that it's very difficult for people who are hated to get a fair shake from anybody. It's insidious. And what I do think is possible is that in a climate where Trump is so reviled, in some way they just weren't as careful. Not that they want to get him killed or anything like that. It's just that you didn't worry about him the same way. Maybe if you cared, if you didn't hate the guy, you would have been worried. You wouldn't have slept so soundly. Like, you work extra hard for the guy you care about.
Do these Secret Service agents hate him? I wonder.
No,
I mean, whoever was
so.
in charge of
right? Who's overseeing?
I mean, the things that they didn't take care of,
right,
were so overt,
right.
you just wonder, like, what it's either like utter incompetence,
Right.
or maybe some incompetence coupled with just a kind of psychological say, well, fuck this guy, like honey, what are you doing? Oh, I got to go worry about Trump now. You got to protect that asshole. Yeah, that's my job.
Something I'd like to know if these sorts of gaps have existed too for Democratic candidates and presidents, and they just haven't been exploited until this kid who plainly was, mentally ill and also obsessed with Trump, and we'll learn more about him, took advantage of that gap, right? Have these gaps existed for years, and just someone came along to fill it, to exploit it? That's another question.
We need
too.
to know that. All right, so then he shows up at the convention with this big bandage.
Yeah, it was an amazing scene. I mean, going there to Milwaukee, it felt like a Trump Comic-Con, a Trump Fan Fest. I mean, really, take Trump for furry convention, but for Trump, take any sort of mass gathering of super fans, right? For anything, for Marvel, whatever, but it's for Trump. So you have the most exuberant pro-Trump people in America coming together, and they're all very happy. There's no the vibes, as they say, were immaculate. No one was, even though the rhetoric on stage, certainly you have people fulminating about the decline of America and carnage in the streets, but the actual people, I mean, they're enjoying it. I mean, they're having fun. They're
and you
laughing.
experienced that for yourself. The vibes were good.
I mean, I would, as a reporter there, what I would say is no one was nasty or mean. Funnily enough, the RNC itself was very open with the media. There was no sort of antagonism. There was no counter protesters. I was shocked. No Democratic or progressive or any interest groups showed up in Milwaukee to protest the convention. That surprised me. I mean, nothing at scale that you could really find. So it was just like kind of this week, this coronation of Trump, the sanctification of Trump. I mean, everyone in that arena was utterly convinced 100% Donald Trump was going to be the next president of the United States. No questions asked. It reminded me a bit. I covered the 2016 convention in Philadelphia where Clinton was nominated. It reminded me a bit of that. There was that exuberance, but the catch was Bernie Sanders had won more than 40% of the delegates in that room. There were marches on the convention. There were a lot of angry Bernie people there. So everyone was sure to an extent Clinton was going to win, but you had a real sense of division at the convention. I mean, there's none of that. Trump owns the Republican Party. It's his party thoroughly. Everyone, even Nikki Haley's there to kiss the ring. So...
But did you see Hulk Hogan?
Yeah, I saw Hulk rip his shirt off. Kid Rock. I mean, it was.
This was the high watermark of Trump's seductive powers. Like I saw more people right at that moment ready to say, "Yeah, maybe I will vote for him."
Definitely. Definitely.
And then he really. So first of all, that ear thing is ridiculous.
People wore ear bandages.
If
Biden showed up to the convention with it, Trump would have just been making fun of him.
Yeah.
And I actually think Trump's getting too much credit for this, as opposed to Paul Pelosi, who Trump made fun of.
Yeah.
Who went through true terror. For his life. Trump was happening for. But I'm sure psychologically, not only the idea that you're almost killed, but that you'll never go in front of crowds again.
Yeah.
After having it. So I don't want to minimize it too much, but I know he would never give a shit if it happened to anybody else.
No, he would not. No.
And he would have eviscerated Biden. You're right, walking around with that maxi pad in his hair.
And this goes back to the thing I've always not liked about Trump. I never thought he was Hitler. It was always my beef. I could show you literal emails when I said this in 2016. His inability to control his behavior, to put it in line with his obvious self-interest is how this guy worries me. All he had to do was get up there and make a tight speech, unifying message, get up.
Yeah.
He goes into a 90-minute riff, and it was the worst. He was obviously overtired. Like, it wasn't even a good 90 minutes of Trump.
No, it was bad. It was I've seen Trump speak, and it was people were leaving. I mean, it was remarkable in its own way, because everything was building up to that speech, and he starts off somberly, and it seems like, wow, this is going to be a different Trump. Maybe we'll see, and it just keeps going and going. He can't help himself. He even joked that he was going to blow the speech at the beginning of his speech. He actually made a sort of self-referential comment, but then of course he goes on and on and on. And I think, I was talking to a friend about this. I don't know who's going to win in November. I really don't. I don't like to make those kinds of predictions, but I do think there is an argument to make Trump was peaking too early. And I think the Republican hubris of that convention, the hubris in general throughout the spring and into the summer, we're head in the polls. We're so head in the polls. And I'm like, wait a second, that was Hillary Clinton in 2016. Why do you want to be so far ahead in May and June and July and be tweeting out, wow, we're up +6 in Michigan? It's like, okay, and the election is still
Can I make a little point
away.
about that? Because I actually
Yeah.
had this conversation with Harry Enton from CNN.
Yeah.
It's an interesting point. People often say that Hillary was also ahead in the polls.
Yeah.
But we don't actually know that. We don't know if she was actually ahead because she was given 99% chance of winning up until Election Day, or if the polls were just very inaccurate in at that time, and she actually didn't have the support we thought she had because they've remodeled all their polls since. It's just like an interesting thing.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's always something to
How
think
far-
about.
yeah.
Because obviously those polls were wrong. Unless overnight people swung from Hillary to Trump, which I don't think they did. Those polls were wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it probably depends the national polls versus the state by state polls. Hillary did win the popular vote, but it was by 2 points, not by 5 points.
Yeah.
So that is true. I mean, some of that probably is faulty polling, but I think at least in the spring and the summer of 2016, even most Republicans believed Donald Trump was probably not going to win the election, and I think the polling is better now.
Yeah.
But, I'd say either way, it was interesting to be at that convention and to think, well, even if Biden doesn't step aside, Biden is no doubt the underdog now. Elections are close now. We live in a world where it's going to hinge on a few states, and that's what it is. There's really no such thing as blowouts and landslides anymore. Are you that excited and that confident that you've won the July convention? And of course, it all changed in a few days, and now it's a very competitive race, and it's one Trump can win. I think, and if you look at Nate Silver's modeling, I think Silver still has Trump at a 60-something% chance of winning the Electoral College, which is still significant. But Harris is already, her odds have already increased, and it's probably just going to get narrower. I mean, Trump has that EC advantage that he's going to keep, I think, into Election Day, but he's a flawed candidate, and I think JD Vance, I wrote a piece very recently. Yeah. I called him a beta in my Substack, not an alpha, and we can talk about JD because I have a lot of JD.
So the next thing is, so much that happened. Again, Trump's inability to do this might be a little different, but somehow that pick of JD Vance was Trump shooting from the hip. This guy immediately, it was clear to anybody watching, as you say, is a beta, humorless. Lacked all charisma.
No charisma. No charisma. That was the thing when I saw him speak. This guy's nothing.
A stiff. Trump hates a stiff.
Yeah.
He's exactly the kind of guy Trump can't stand.
Yes.
And this again is the overconfidence. I guess they really thought Biden would stay in because what he needed was for these people who were I knew a lot of people maybe I will.
Right.
Someone just to communicate to people. Donald Trump's not crazy. Marco Rubio.
Yeah, I was thinking Rubio would have been a very strong
You've
pick.
known him for 30 years.
You could have pulled probably a lot of people on the fence with
Instead,
Rubio.
he goes to and Trump, we've known him for so long, even when he says stuff, he says there's going to be mass deportations. You don't really think he's going to do mass deportations because we've heard him say this stuff before in his other interviews where he does, we don't like to hear him talk that way, but we somehow are inured to it. But then who does he pick? A guy who actually sounds like he means it.
Yeah, and he's a smart guy. I mean, he knows what he's talking about.
Why would you pick him?
Yeah.
He's awful.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think the overconfidence, I think Don Jr. played a big role in it. Don Jr. and JD get along, same generation, sort of same intellectual milieu. I think JD's a smarter guy, but they sort of roll.
Donald Trump Jr. in an intellectual milieu.
They're into, I think into the same sorts of people in podcasts. I would say, the same sorts of kind of sort of right nationalist, vaguely populist people. I think they both like. I mean, there are things about Vance I think are interesting, and when I watched the speech, there are parts of his speech he sounded like Bernie Sanders or Sherrod Brown, senator in Ohio. He has a popular streak that I think to an extent is genuine, but then if you take out, we won't even talk about the ideology, just pure showmanship and political skill, he doesn't have it. And what's interesting is if you look at his biography and compare it to Obama's, it's actually quite similar. You have Ivy League law school grad who writes a memoir that is zeitgeist defining in some way and becomes very successful, uses this memoir to launch a political career, achieves a Senate seat at a very young age, is in the Senate for a very short amount of time, then shoots off into the stratosphere. The difference between Obama and Vance is Obama had it, he had that charisma, and Vance does not. And that's the big difference.
Yeah, I can make the case that I'm very much like Paul McCartney too.
Yes.
Young guy.
You line up those.
Gets a job in a foreign country playing music.
You could make those.
Sheath underwear is where it's at. They're the official underwear of comedy. All of the big comedians are wearing them. Their underwear has a 2-pouch design. One's for your dick and the other's for your balls. They'll keep your dick from sticking to your leg and your balls from sticking to your dick. It's a miracle.
Let's see. We're going to open up here
Sheath underwear.
a pair of. First of all,
Do I have a pair for
the
me?
first thing you
Yeah,
notice,
those are for
the first thing you notice, Phil, is very, very, very soft.
No, that's the elastane
And
fabric blend.
fabric blend.
Now
No,
wait, can
it
I
says-
just see it?
92% bamboo, 8% elastane. What bamboo? That's
So
No added sugar.
so you're
there's a famous calypso song called "The Big Bamboo," which is like a song about a big penis.
And Noam, look at how it supports
wait,
your
so you guys are supposed to wait a second. You guys are put
This
this
is the white
on,
guy model.
and then you stick your
right?
penis
It's all right.
through this, or you put your balls through here. You literally
Periel, this is where your balls go.
how do they
And
get
your-
in
and your
there?
pee-pee-
Oh,
your pee-pee goes to here, and then you take it out to go pee.
like a little head.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, this is.
They look really
I mean,
comfy.
doesn't that feel comfortable? Doesn't that look
Well,
comfortable
it
just
is.
by looking at it?
So go to sheathunderwear.com/seller or use code SELLER at checkout to get 20% off your first order. Each order includes Sheath's 100% money-back guarantee. Again, for 20% off your first order, sheathunderwear.com/seller or promo code SELLER at checkout. Get Sheath Underwear. Support the show. Support your balls.
And I think Vance, I mean, that's the issue is, Vance was a young guy who wrote a memoir that was decent, that was well marketed and became very successful. And he fell into the Peter Thiel world, and Thiel sort of made him rich. And that was a good break for him. And he was able to charm Trump Jr. and Trump. And that's how he got the Senate career in Ohio. He won this Republican primary
Barely,
thanks to Trump,
barely.
and underperformed the ticket. So, I mean, yeah, he's weak. He's trying very hard to be this tough guy. You have the cat lady comment, and you it just comes off as alienating to the average person. Like, what are you?
Let me tell you what bothered me.
And Trump had to clean it up. It was interesting. I saw Trump's comment on it. He said, I think he said something like, we're fine. We like families, but we're fine. Some people don't have families, and that's okay. And Trump gave a very sober. It was interesting on Fox News.
Well,
but yeah, go ahead.
Trump is not a weirdo.
No, he's not a weirdo, and he's not online. He's a
and
of the world.
there are certain things, like say a bad day or whatever. There's certain things somebody can say, and you could tell they got carried away. Or
Yeah.
But and I have my own standard about it. But there's certain things I see, and I just can't erase it. And one was how stiff he was with the Diet Mountain Dew jokes.
Yes.
But even worse, when I saw him on Megyn Kelly. Now, Megyn Kelly, who I know a little bit, and I like her very much, but she was not at her toughest.
Yeah.
She was giving a very kind interview. She was really trying to give him a chance to make himself known to people could be acquainted with him. And she asked him about this thing about what about women who can't conceive.
Yes.
And somebody asked him, well, what about your daughter? What if your daughter weren't able to conceive? And his answer was, and I just can't get over this because nothing you can say will overcome this.
Yeah.
His answer was, well, first of all, my daughter's 2 years old, so that's disgusting.
What? Someday she won't be too.
I mean, and this is he had all week. He knew he was doing his interview.
Yeah,
he
you can
knows
prepare
he
for
asked
that.
about
That's not the answer.
This was a prepared
Yeah.
response.
Yeah. She won't be two in 25
What
years
kind of
from now.
normal
Yeah.
person thinks that somebody's alluding to they're sexually with?
Yeah.
And like this guy it's beyond beta.
Yeah.
And they should drop him.
I think.
Can they?
Yes.
Yeah,
okay.
they can do anything. Yeah, I mean, the Democrats actually in 1972 they had a The George McGovern ticket had
Eagleton.
Tom Eagleton, yes, who was revealed today. He'd probably get past this, but it was revealed he'd been institutionalized for depression and mental illness.
Lose his pilot's license.
This was a huge scandal in 1972. So he was dropped from the ticket late in the summer. So yeah, they can do it. The party rules. They can do what they want. If Trump were, I think, savvier and more cutthroat, he would drop him tomorrow and say, all right, Marco, little Marco, come on the ticket. JD, you tried. You're done. Can't do it. And that's what he would do. I don't know if he'll do that, but
Why
agree,
wouldn't he do that?
because I think it's a good question. Why wouldn't he? I mean,
He hates to admit he was wrong.
yeah, I think that's part of it. I think he made a choice, and I think it's very hard for him to say publicly he screwed up. He never does that. He's never apologized.
Wouldn't he rather win though?
You
Like if he thought that it came down to winning or cutting Vance?
I mean, there's many things
Yeah.
Trump could have done much better.
Yeah.
I mean, if he had only admitted that he lost the last election on
Right.
January 5th,
he'd probably
he'd be a
be doing
shoo-in
better.
right now.
Yeah, right. I mean, I think Trump, for all his skills, has these like very permanent character flaws
Yes.
that keep him from doing easier things. You know, right? Like Jan 6. I mean, you just don't do Jan.
Right.
It was a close election. He ran better than the polls. He did very well. He got a lot of votes. And you lose, you can say, all right, now I'm going to come back and still my party, right? But he could not. So I think with this Vance thing too, I think he's got his sons in on it. You know, Don Jr. is very pro Vance, so I think that hurts it. But yeah, I mean, I think, you know, you think of like the discussion of weirdos, you know, someone who doesn't spend all their day on Reddit and like, you know, right-wing blogs and stuff, doesn't think about like natalism or think about, you know,
What is
people
natalism? Everybody should have children?
Yeah, well, yes, that the birth rates are declining, which is true, and it's an issue in developed countries throughout the world that birth rates are going down. We have to find a way to replace the population, and that's all true. The issue is it veers very quickly into this sort of very alienating talk of the people not doing it. You know, what's wrong with them? Why aren't they doing it? It's the failure of this. It's the failure of that. And then
it also dovetails with an ugly part of the anti-immigration movement, which can be racist.
Yes, it's also
white people are not reproducing.
Yes, and
so
that
we're gonna replace it with
immigrants
brown
are going to replace you. So yes, you have that part of it. So, but I guess what I'm saying is someone like Trump, for all his craziness, he's not thinking about that. It never occurred to Donald Trump to attack childless people. The cat, like Trump doesn't care. Like he's all his life he's been around people, have kids, don't have kids, you know, 3 kids, 0 kids, gay, straight. I mean, he doesn't care. It's not. But JD Vance, you know, he's in this world where it's like, oh, we've got to make sure, you know, everyone's having 5 kids or they're deviant liberals. And that's how you end up on a podcast, right? Where you're right. We all say things on podcasts you might regret, but you know, there are things that just wouldn't even occur to us to say, and that's the problem with Vance. And I think you've that, but like you said too, I mean, this bigger problem is he's not an asset to the ticket, and I think now they're
huge opportunity cost also.
Yes, and the VP debates, which will probably happen. I know Trump's making noise that will he debate? Not, I think he's going to have to.
He has to.
And you're going to have to have a VP debate, and we'll see as we're taping this. Kamala will soon pick her VP, and whoever she picks is going to be a competent, normal politician, and they're going to be on a stage with a guy who's been in the Senate for 2 years and was Peter Thiel's buddy and wrote a book, you know, 8 years ago, and that's his resume.
And by the way, it's totally. I mean, I asked Harry about this too. If you control for being married with children, there is predictive politics of that. It's empirically provable that when people have children, they do veer, on average, in a different direction politically. And to say, listen, I spoke inartfully. Well, all I was saying is that once you have children, you begin to see the world differently.
Yeah.
You begin to think past your own generation.
No.
And I think this leads to more mature political decisions. This is not hard to get yourself out from under. It's just not.
It's also, if you're a normal person, you just say we should make it easier for people to have families, and just say I support policies where we can support child care and support housing policies to make it easier to buy a home, and that's whether you're conservative, liberal, that you can say that. And it's
I drive up West
hard.
4th Street on the way to work, and I go by these sex shops. There's the Pink Pussycat Boutique and another one there. They've been there almost my whole life, you know, it's adult life, and I never thought anything about them. now I have an 11-year-old daughter or 12-year-old daughter, and I don't want to see her huge dildos in the window.
Yeah.
And it's just a little example that everybody can immediately understand of when you have kids.
How much is that dildo in the window?
How much is that? Okay, so let's get to that now. Kamala has to pick a running mate.
Yes.
And now this we might part company here. It seems to me pretty clear that Josh Shapiro is on paper the best guy for the job.
Yes.
And B, he might not get it because he's a Jew.
Yes, I've had this discussion with people where you could have a Jewish VP and a Jewish first man, and is that too Jewish? I say this is a Jewish person. Is that too Jewish for America? We could find out.
Or for the left, which obviously, I mean, from
some of it though. I think most. I think the median Democrat wouldn't care. Put it that way.
And you have a female of color.
Yeah, you have that
the
too.
Job of the ticket.
No,
I don't think the median Democrat. I don't think cares that he's Jewish.
I don't think the median Democrat cares. I agree with you.
You're talking about leftists who are pro-Palestine.
Well, let me tell you. If I were Kamala, I would not pick Shapiro.
Pick Kelly.
I pick anybody but a Jew because
Why did you say this? This is not the first time I've heard this, so I'm not gasping.
Because
it sounds terrible.
I'm just gasping that he's actually.
Anyone put a Jew.
I would tell you why.
Yeah.
Because assuming that I have to make decisions based on wanting to win, as opposed to taking a stand for justice.
Yeah.
Because if it's already clear that if I pick him, it is going to bring to the surface ugly things from within 15% of the party base.
Right.
That I am now going to have to be dealing with.
Somewhat.
And at the convention, where at the RNC, even to mention the word Jew led to cheers.
Cheers, yes.
At the DNC, that is not going to be the case.
It's going to be
so,
different.
what do I want to open this can of worms for?
Right.
So,
but isn't it that they're going to lose a lot of Jews and
I don't think so.
That aren't going to vote?
Jews they haven't lost by now, I don't think they're going to lose.
There also aren't a lot of Jews.
Most Jews don't care if we don't want a Jew in the White House or anywhere close to it.
I wouldn't mind a Jew.
But we don't need it. We don't need it. We got other shit cooking. We got show business.
Got a lot cooking.
There is another argument which I'm not averse to, which is that at a time when there's a war between Israel and Iran, whatever it is, and America has to be seen as an honest broker, that you don't want a Jewish president anyway, because through the eyes of the other side, they might just assume.
Problem is you'll have that for the next 100 years, so you got to put a Jew on ice till probably the 22nd century.
Dealt with that.
We'll solve it.
Put anybody on ice.
Yeah.
Anybody that they're going to put a Jew on ice when Noam gets frozen.
That's going to be the title of this episode.
But what percentage of people that are willing to vote for a half Indian, half black person with a Jewish husband are all of a sudden going to be turned off because the VP candidate is Jewish?
I think that's a fair point. I actually think that's a fair point because we went through this with Obama. Why is the Jew the line we can't cross when we've done it now for a black politician with a name that many people found strange, and Kamala Harris, right, half black, half Indian.
It's not because the half black and half Indian. I mean, hold on a second. We're talking about the intersectional base of the Democratic Party.
No, I know what you're saying. You're saying
black, half Indian.
You're saying you have a Jewish VP. It'll kick up Israel.
They're already calling him genocide, Josh.
In a way that if he picked Kelly, for example, just the astronaut, the kind of interesting but boring astronaut from Arizona, you wouldn't deal with it. No one has feelings about Mark Kelly and Israel. So I see that point. I think it's a fair point.
She is not. I mean, whatever you think about Israel, she's not reliable. Even if you agree with this, that she ought not be reliable. She's not reliable on Israel already. For instance, when she made that first speech after Netanyahu gave his speech, after she had the meeting with him, she said the following line. She said, Israel has a right to defend themselves, blah, 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 all the kind of boilerplate stuff that Hamas is terrible. And then she says, but I will not be silent. Now, that line is a dead giveaway psychologically of where someone's coming from. When you say, but I will not be silent.
I think she's to the left of Biden on Israel.
Who's asking you to be silent? Like you're saying as if there's pressure on me to be silent. Like, you don't say, but I will not be silent if no one's
Yeah.
pressuring you. So, and she will not be silent. I will say what, I'm being pressured not to say. I don't think Josh Shapiro is an I will not be silent guy. I think
No, I think Shapiro is at least in the Biden camp
Yes.
of supporting Israel indefinitely. And I think Harris's policy views are relatively just not formed either
Yes.
way. I think she was not in the Senate very long, and at VP foreign policy was nowhere near her portfolio. So I do think she's a bit of a blank slate in terms of where she will really be on these issues. Like, we don't really know.
But we can use that example of Biden and his cognitive decline in so many ways. The fact is, she's a woman of a particular milieu, under the peer pressure of that milieu, who has expressed intersectional ideology, expressed equity as opposed to equality notions, and it would be quite out of character for someone with all those, with that profile, to not veer to the left on Israel-Palestine, which is her right to do. But I'm saying let's not pretend otherwise. Joe Biden, if you look at the polls, like Democrats, above like 55, they're like 80% pro-Israel, right? Biden is of a particular generation
Yeah.
that has a kind of memory of the Holocaust, or
Yeah.
the gravitational force of the Holocaust, and they are, in his heart, I believe Joe Biden is quite pro-Israel.
He is, yeah.
He might buckle a little bit because Michigan and because they're going into an election. He's still a politician, but if you gave him sodium pentothal, I believe he would actually say, "No, I'm a Zionist." I believe. I don't think she
I
is.
think what the inevitable shift that is coming is future Democratic presidents, whomever they may be, will be not as resolutely supportive of Israel as Joe Biden has been. I think the party is moving left on that. I think the Republican Party is polarizing in the other direction.
And do you agree they're also a little anti-Semitic on the left? I mean, the stuff we saw.
I don't Kamala. No,
No, not
I
Kamala.
don't like the
Not
mainstream.
Kamala. Who was tearing down those posters? Who was saying those things in all the campuses? I mean, some of the stuff.
Yeah,
it's just gone too far.
I have a lot of thoughts.
Will
on
the
this.
Democratic
Yeah, well, you have a lot of thoughts.
I have a
will
lot of
the,
thoughts
will
on
the
this.
Jews
Yeah.
finally abandon the Democratic Party en masse?
No, not in the near. I mean, certain Jews. I mean, Orthodox Jews, yes. And
No, not
Jews
Orthodox Jews,
But the
though.
secular Jew, no, not the secular, otherwise liberal Jew, no. But yeah, I think a very observant Orthodox Hasidic.
But they've
Jews-
already.
Those
They
guys
already-
are not. I'm not talking
Yeah.
about those guys.
But they were
Yeah,
never.
Yeah,
I think,
those
in fact.
guys-
I think the secular will, if there's a reasonable Republican. I actually think if it's just a normal person with most of Trump's policies, but
Could they? Yeah.
if,
could they
it was
do it?
me speaking
Yeah.
like Donald, saying the same kind of, like, I think we should control the border, like basically
Yeah.
kind of Trump. Trump is not that conservative in his actual
No,
policies, right?
he's not. No.
I think you would see quite a few Jews.
I have to
Falling
tell
up.
you, I've seen just
We know them, yeah.
yeah, like I've
Yeah.
seen people who are like gay creative Jews.
Yeah.
Who have been lifelong Democrats have just been like, I am not going to vote for people who are anti-Semitic and who hate Israel.
Yeah.
So now, what's your feelings about the
The left. Yeah.
anti-Semitism?
Yeah. I think they're.
Don't make the mistake that they made about Biden. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think so. I have a few thoughts. I mean, for one, you have a very complicated situation where Judaism, which is a many thousands-year-old religion, is completely associated with the actions of a nation state. Now we know why that is, obviously, right? That we know the history, but it gets very fraught, right? Where you have a nation state with a democratically elected government, a prime minister whom no one in America voted for, making decisions, doing things we can say right or wrong, right? They're doing things that, because of the dynamics, are done de facto in the name of Judaism. So it gets very difficult where, yes, there are anti-Semites out there, undoubtedly, right? Is it anti-Semitic to very furiously criticize the Israeli government? No, right? When does that veer into anti-Semitism? I think that's an interesting question,
But we've
right?
seen it veering into anti-Semitism.
Depends on
a lot.
Depends on which instance, though. Again, is it if one, for example, if one tears up the Israeli flag, is it anti-Semitism, right? that's a nation state. That is a country. If you tear up the American flag, it's anti-American. Are you anti-white? Are you anti-Protestant?
I'm with you,
What are
and
you?
I want to.
I think it's yeah,
I want to have the essence of truth on everybody.
yeah,
But when I saw, like at Columbia, there's a Zionist among us.
Yeah.
Take one step forward. Take one, and then to know that that same guy, Kimani James, had actually said in his interview with the
Yeah.
Columbia administrators, "I want to see the Zionists die,"
yeah,
and they did nothing.
yeah,
And the posters being torn down, and it was just so much stuff we've seen.
yeah.
But it's also the notion of intersectionality that sees the Jews as white people.
Yes, which is stupid. I think that's dumb.
And they express
think it's-
openly
it's
and
ignorant, yeah.
proudly. No, openly and proudly they express hatred of white people.
Yeah.
You'll have people in the Senate. We've heard enough of white men.
Yeah.
And it's just a little a slight tick beyond
Yeah.
that to say we've heard enough from Jews, because they've already normalized the idea that you can judge people by that. And then you say, we want equality of outcome. Well, who is more the enemy of equality of outcome than this tiny population of Jews that dominates 10 to 1, 100 to 1 per capita
Yeah.
in the outcome of intellect, in everything. So, and they define, this Robin DiAngelo and Kendi, they have defined racism as inequality of outcome.
Yes.
So even without Israel, they have set us up
Yeah.
with an intellect, an ideology which sanitizes the fact that we are the villains by nature of our achievement, by nature of our color, by nature of our, and then that to me is why they are so anti-Israel. It's not they're so anti-Israel. I think that's what has prepped them
Right.
and softened them up then to hate Israel, because you may have a problem with Israel, but the story they have about Israel is wacky, is crazy.
Yeah.
They want the elimination of Israel. Yes, maybe in the third week in October, they didn't know what River of the Sea actually meant. So they didn't know, but they know by now. They haven't let up on it.
Is anti-Zionism anti-Semitism?
Yes.
The same thing.
Well, at certain times.
I would not say it is.
Well,
But yeah, but that's a disagreement. Yeah, I would not say it is.
Does it have to be a noxious, toxic?
I'll tell you what is anti-Semitism.
Ideology?
I thought a lot about this.
Yeah.
Of course, it's not. If I made the point to Brett Stevens months ago that, well, some people are pro-Putin against Ukraine, and they don't have some hateful ideology to explain it. So somebody can always have any kind of view.
Yeah.
So you could think Israel shouldn't exist. It's weird because it's a country since 1948. But, and this goes back to what I just said, but once people are on full notice that when you say river to the sea, most people think that means you want to see people annihilated or
I would say with
Wait, give me another-
yeah.
We want to globalize the Intifada.
Right.
Well, you may not know what Intifada is, but normally when the Arabic people threaten another Intifada, they mean the killing of.
Yeah.
And once they are informed of those ambiguities and they dig in on using that language, that hurtful language, I know very well when I say Intifada, they know it could mean killing them. And I'm going to keep using Intifada. There's so many other ways I could explain what I want. No, I mean, let's globalize a peaceful uprising. Let's globalize peaceful protests against Israel. If they dig in on the word Intifada,
Yeah.
I would say, obviously we have no technology to determine it. I would say at that point you have to say preponderance of evidence this is animus towards Jews, because it's disgusting. Like if it was black people and I said something and somebody says, no, you have to understand that's what the slave owners used to say about black people. Immediately I would say, no, I didn't mean that. I'll never say it that way again. I only meant this.
Right.
It's the most natural thing in the
Yeah.
world to correct yourself when somebody presents to you a reasonable interpretation where they would take you to be hateful or, God forbid, want somebody to die. But they don't change their language. And that, I think, is case closed as far as I'm concerned. I think they are anti-Semitic. Not all of them, of course.
Yeah. I think language is tricky though, because I think yes, some are sat down and explained to, but I think some are not, right? And some think a slogan is a call for liberation. It's a call for They see it as a call for Palestinian liberation, right? That's how some see it. Some see it as the murder, perhaps, of Jews. Others see it as the uplift of Palestinian people, right?
These are the people who freak out about pronouns because it offends people. You know it offends people.
Well, everyone's hypocrite.
Pick a different slogan.
But everyone's right. But that's the problem. Like literally everyone's hypocrite, right? You have all the anti-woke free speech crusaders throughout the 2010s telling us, language is not violence. We have to protect free speech. I'm a huge First Amendment person.
We both are.
Right. And then it comes to Israel, and suddenly you get the most woke sounding arguments in defense of Israel that I have heard.
I agree with you 100%.
You cannot say, no, this word is too hurtful. How dare I'll say that, look, the Palestinian protesters, a lot of them, I'll say a few things. One, you're gonna have Israel forever. There's gonna be a state of Israel. So if one is calling for like a binational state, support it or not, it's never going to happen, right? I think we all agree with that. But you have these discussions where I get very tired personally because it feels like one can't even have the discussion because language itself is getting so policed in the way the left policed language. And I was very against that. I do find now, that the Barry Weisses of the world, the sort of anti-woke right, I saw at the Republican convention, right? This idea, we're for free expression. Well, you are. So debate someone who's critical of Zionism or debate these slogans, right? And if these protesters are committing violence, right? I agree that is horrible, right? 99% of them, you can disagree with what they're saying. I disagree with things they say too, right? They're camping out. You can say don't camp out on property, right? You should be expelled from school. Fair, fine. That's an argument, right? But these protesters, these pro-Palestinian protesters, anti-Israel protesters, certainly, how many of them were rioting and looting? How many of them were smashing up windows? How many of them were punching out cops?
Okay,
I mean, they weren't, right?
Let me
and yet
answer.
we're so incensed by them in a way. Whereas in 2020, we could say, yes, these protests got violent. That's fair.
Let me answer. First of all, we could write it on a napkin what percentage you think of the anti-Zionists
Yeah,
are.
we'll never-
But,
right,
but neither of us thinks 100% of anti-Zionists are anti-Semitic or 0% of anti-Zionists are anti-Semitic. Because if you're 100% of anti-Semites are likely anti-Zionists, and there's a lot of anti-Semites out there, so certainly, that's unknowable. And from day one, I even defended that woman, the first woman who got fired at NYU, who wrote the letter from the law school.
Yes,
I tweeted in her favor.
Yes.
I had a guy working for me that first week who wore a Palestinian flag to work, and I had a Jewish comedian outright. I said, "Leave me alone. It's none of my business."
Yeah.
I don't want to police anybody's language.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Zero. As a matter of fact, I prefer to know where people stand. I'm not talking about policing their language.
Yeah.
I'm talking about reading their sentiment
Sure.
from the language they choose to use and in the context they choose to use it. And I know that if I was using language which black people reasonably could say to me, what you're saying is what people who want to kill black people say.
Right.
And I continued to use it, they would suspect that I don't like that. And they'd probably be right, because any decent person would find a different slogan.
So if you are a protester who is calling for the end of the war in Gaza, calling for a ceasefire, and you're calling for a Palestinian
Two
state,
states now.
right?
Say that.
What if you're calling for a binational single state with equal citizens, Israeli, Jewish, Palestinian, all have one vote and all can come together?
I can ask
What if
ChatGPT
you're calling for that? What's your slogan then?
I could come up with a slogan, but
what I just described, some people would call virulently anti-Semitic. What I just described, they would say that is calling for the end of the Jewish majority
But
state.
when River to the Sea
Right.
is taken from actual genocidal slogans in the original Arabic, and
they need a new slogan. They should find a new slogan.
They don't want a new slogan. That's what
my
they
point.
mean.
Right.
They have not.
Well, there's nothing that's popular or like.
I mean,
what would
it's
it be?
easy to come up with a new slogan.
Like Black Lives Matter
The
caught on,
Intifada
right?
even actually bothers me more because
Yeah.
more than once Abbas has threatened another
Right.
Intifada, and nobody
Yeah.
ever asked the question: do you think he means peaceful protest?
I'd say strategically, I agree. If I were advising, if I were giving counsel to the anti-Israel anti-Zionist faction, right? I would agree with you in saying, look, do you want to build out popular support for your viewpoints? These slogans are alienating to people. Say something else, right? You're saying they don't want to. That means they hate Jews. I'm saying it's complicated. Some probably hate Jews, but some are just like, oh, this is a good slogan. Like this is what it sounds like. This is what Palestinian liberation sounds like. Like we don't have other. What are the other calls for Palestinian liberation that are popular in the protest, just as Black Lives Matter caught on?
How about Palestinian Lives
breathe.
Matter? I mean, that seems
do
like
that.
pretty,
PLM.
Yeah,
But someone would call it anti-Semitic.
It's
though.
a very
no.
interesting. It's a very interesting.
I
type
like
of,
PLM. Sure.
It's a very interesting
Yeah.
type of anti-Semitism. I've commented before because but almost all these protesters, if their daughter brought home a Jewish guy to marry, they wouldn't care less.
Yeah.
Like traditionally, like if you hate Jews, that's the worst thing. Like your daughter's going to marry. It's not that kind of anti-Semitism. So it is what it is. You only have to perceive it, but what it is filtering down to my children,
Right.
where their friends have made remarks about their
Right.
Jewish. My daughter, God, I don't know if I tell you this. So this may be a little indulgent, especially in your interview, but I was going to tell you. So my daughter went to Hebrew school. She hated Hebrew school.
Yeah.
And she didn't want to go through the rigmarole of getting a bat mitzvah. And the truth is, Orthodox don't get bat mitzvah. It's an American tradition.
Right.
My mother wasn't bat mitzvah. My grandmother was not bat mitzvah. And this was happening right at the time of October 7th. And I was very afraid of turning her off, making everything about Judaism being something she hated. At the same time, there was all this anti-Israel feeling in the air. So I decided to let it go. I'm not gonna force it. And I got some flack from Jewish friends, whatever it is. And day before yesterday, my daughter says to me, I want to get a Jewish star to wear. Did I tell you? And I was like, I said, really? I said, so somehow something triggered her.
Yeah.
And I suspect it was stuff she was hearing at summer camp.
Yeah.
So somehow this is filtering down to Jewish children feeling that it's an issue to be Jewish.
Yeah.
And I don't need it to be anti-Semitism. I can grant you for the sake of argument that it's not anti-Semitism.
Sure. Something else.
But as a Jewish citizen of America, it's affecting my ability to live.
Yeah.
For my daughter's ability to live like I lived
Yeah.
as a young man, and it's getting closer to reversion to the mean as close to the way my father described living as a Jew in America. And we need to fight against this.
Even if it's not anti-Semitism, considering most Jews are Zionists,
Yeah.
somebody that's virulently anti-Zionist is going to be anti-most Jews.
So
at a minimum.
So this is where we can get to sort of historical context here. If you look at the history of Zionism, there were many Jews who were not Zionist going back to the early and mid 20th century who felt that the idea of establishing one country for Jewish people in this desert was not
That's different, though.
a great
That's-
idea.
That's pre the
And
state.
so,
yeah.
but post
that was a strategic argument among
right.
various factions. Yeah.
But post 1948, I'll give you then a different example. Post 1948, a lot of Jewish intellectuals in the United States in the 1950s into the 1960s, pre 1967, I would say, a lot of Jewish intellectuals would have said this Israel thing is not great for the American
I think
Jew.
Einstein was
Yeah. Oh yeah. Einstein, and I think beyond Einstein too, just into those who were born in America and working in America, they would have said something like, listen, like we're trying to assimilate into the United States here. A lot of them were I'm talking about the New York intellectuals. They're very pro-America, anti-Soviet Union.
I'm sorry to stop you, but it's very important.
Yeah. But I would say is they saw it as a burden on the American Jew.
But this is the thing. This is a
Yeah.
very important distinction going
Yeah.
forward, because I want you to, is that what they didn't see it as was an immoral state. And if you're an anti-Zionist because you think it doesn't benefit the Jews, it's not the best strategy.
Yeah.
These are all arguments. None of those could be considered anti-Semitic. Actually, all those arguments coming from what you think is best for the Jews.
there are left-wing Jews today who think it's an immoral state.
Yeah.
They are there. Yeah.
Anti-Zionism now is almost exclusively this was an evil outpost of Western settler colonialism.
Right.
And that's just different.
Right.
and I can't
It's
conflate it with
it's
previous
also
anti-
tricky because
You understand me, right?
any nation, right, is the product of settler colonialism. The United States is, Europe.
Except
you know.
more than half of Israel has been in that Middle
Yeah.
East. It was evicted from the
Yeah.
Arab countries,
Right, it's
And
also-
Jerusalem always had a majority of Jews, and
Yeah.
then some
But-
refugees went there.
You had a war in 1948. It was quite rough, and a lot of Palestinians were thrown out of their land too.
Yeah. Listen, that Nakba is nothing compared
Yeah.
to the Nakba they're suffering now.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
but they are similar only in the sense that in 1948, I mean, closer than we are to COVID, these people defending themselves in 48 were from the concentration camps.
Yeah.
And now they're facing another genocidal enemy.
Yeah.
5 Arab armies attacked, and shit happened in that war. Some people ran away. Many were thrown out. It's almost impossible to imagine that they didn't throw more of them out, considering what those people expressed as the intention they wanted for the Jews at a time when on planet Earth, the slaughter of civilians as targets was completely normalized. We were bombing Dresden. We had dropped an atom bomb
absolutely.
all over the world. It was just open season, 25 million Russians killed. And the Jews pushed out 400,000 people who were attacking them.
Right.
And where'd they push them out to? Over the line. We're in Manhattan, we push them to Queens, to the land which is supposed to now become their country. Right?
I
No, we want to stay in your country. Well, you can stay in our country,
Yeah.
but you're killing us, so we're pushing you to that country. This needs to be reprocessed. This is not this great historical crime. This is, like I said, it's hard to imagine that they didn't push more of them out after they were attacked. So I'm not defending anybody's pushed out. I think they should pay them reparations as part of any settlement. Everybody's pushed out should get paid money for the land that they were evicted from. That's the way things are settled in the modern world. When people get pushed out, even in America, we want to build a highway. We throw you out of your land, and we pay you for it. That's a much less reason to throw somebody out of their land. So I can't. What's happening now in Gaza to me is 1,000 times worse to the Palestinians than what happened.
I always wish that Europe hadn't been so anti-Semitic, where as reparations they could have just given a chunk of Germany and France to the Jews after World War II. They're never going to do that. They could have just carved out a nice state there in Europe, but that would
But
give
that's
the
not
Jews.
the ancestral homeland of the Jewish people.
They would have taken it.
They would have taken it.
They would have
probably would have taken
and there
it,
are all sorts.
but-
If you look at the history of Zionism, there are all kinds of discussions about where, including Africa, where this land of the Jews would
we
go.
have to move on.
We're here now, right?
And what's
And there's
interesting
no-
about it
we're
is
here.
that Gaza is Palestinians, but Hezbollah is not Palestinians. They're not even Sunni. Iran is not even Arab. So when you look at the Sunni countries, who are cousins almost indistinguishable from the Palestinians, right? They are actually indistinguishable from the Palestinians, except their histories diverged geographically a little bit. They've made their peace with Israel. The big guns against Israel now are people who have no actual stake in it in the way the Palestinians do. So this has to tell you something about the root cause of the conflict, that it goes deeper than you displaced us and now we want some land back.
No, it's also a conflict that tragically is not solvable in the near future. I think that's something we all grapple with, because we're used to having easy solutions. We're used to saying, well, if X, Y, and Z are done, or if A, B, and C are executed, we can fix this. I'll give you an example of Russia, Ukraine. I think that is a war that is ultimately solvable, and will be brought to a conclusion at some point. It will not satisfy many people, but it will happen. I think it'll happen probably in the next year, 2 years.
This is
or so.
solvable too, though.
Actually, Ukraine's the last thing I want to talk to you about. This is,
I don't.
Well, if you deal with Iran, all of the armies that, quote unquote, armies that are attacking Israel are proxy armies of Iran, right? Like, the Lebanese people don't want to go to war with Israel, and the Israeli people don't want to go to war with them either.
Right, but how do you this Palestinian problem of Gaza? How do you give them a functioning state? How do you get rid of Hamas but then have the PLO run it? How do you have a peace agreement?
It's not
How
that
do you get
hard.
there?
It's not that
haven't
hard.
gotten there yet.
It's because
How do you do it?
The the $64,000 question is, and I'm skeptical about this question, is a functioning state side by side with Israel?
Yeah, Israel doesn't want it. That's
does it have anything to do with what they want? They don't express that. They have no leader who says it. They've, by all accounts, when they've been offered that, they turned it down. There's when George Bush had Abbas in the White House, Abbas turned away from Bush. When Barack Obama offered, he couldn't get an answer from Abbas. There's no literature. There's no slogans. There's nothing about them. The Israeli position, and this is where you're at a disadvantage because you don't know them like we do. The Israelis were all for it. All for it. They elected Olmert, the prime minister, which is not that long ago,
Yeah.
on a platform of withdrawing from the West Bank. And he was elected. He said, I'm going to withdraw from the West Bank, and they elected him. Where they really moved to the right was when they began to associate that kind of sentiment with their children being killed in intifadas. It's like, we need to wake up. So let's just go on to Ukraine.
Right.
Ukraine.
Yeah.
There was a time when, and I blame Biden for Russia invading Ukraine, by the way, but there was a time when we thought they might just pull this off. Putin might get deposed. We heard he might have pancreatic cancer.
I didn't think they would, but yes.
But
people did.
People did, and I certainly had no right to my own opinion. I said, maybe, and if they could, then I'd support it, right?
Yeah.
The bloom is off that rose. There's no way Ukraine is ousting Russia or defeating Russia or Putin's being ousted. None of it's happening. So, like, you could buy futures on a stock, and then now you're selling it short. It doesn't, you have to change your mind because of reality on the ground. So, where are the Democrats on this? They're still pretending, somehow, that Ukraine can pull this out, and then they get mad at people like Trump or even Vance, who imply we're going to impose a settlement here.
Yeah.
But I'm more towards, well, if you don't want to impose a settlement, what the hell do you expect is going to happen there? Just keep killing these people?
I've been writing on Russia, Ukraine from time to time in my own Substack in The Nation, and I hold views on it that are currently associated with the Republican Party, which are very weird to me. And I think it speaks to the strangeness of our current political situation, where the most hawkish internationalist elements on this issue are in the Democratic coalition, and it's the Republicans like Vance.
It's because the neocons moved to the Democrats.
Yeah, like the Vance-Trump wing sounds a lot like Noam Chomsky, and literally Noam Chomsky was saying, look, we have to, and Kissinger both actually were saying similar things, that this war needs a settlement of some kind. It's not necessarily going to make everyone happy, but I wrote this going back to 2022. Russia cannot be defeated in the sense that you're fighting a land war against one of the largest countries on earth. They have far more people. They have far more material. They have modern weaponry,
Stronger.
and they're going to stick it out. Now, can Russia run roughshod and take over Ukraine and Europe? The answer is no. And the reasoning is rather simple. And when I learned this, I was surprised that more people don't understand this. With the evolution of military technology today, it's much easier to play defense than offense. With drone technology, with the way we can launch missile strikes now, it is very hard to land invade somewhere. You can't do blitzkrieg World War II style invasions any longer. You can't march across countries. Once you get a little into it, the defense gets all the advantages. You can dig in, you can spy on your opponents, their positioning, and you can target them. So that's basically what happened in Russia, Ukraine. Russia came in, they got bogged down. Ukraine made some progress, they got bogged down, and you basically have a World War I style conflict. It is sort of like very modern trench warfare. Two sides that can't really progress that much. They're just killing each other. Mm-hmm. And at some point, an adult has to get in the room, which is the United States. We are the adult. And we have to say, listen, guys, this is not benefiting anyone. Russia, you're not getting all of Ukraine. You're not getting Europe. Ukraine, you're not getting Crimea back. It's not happening. we reach a settlement, we drop a boundary, people will be mad and sad, but we have to stop the killing. And I don't blame Biden for the invasion. I don't, but
I do.
I
I'll tell you
blame.
why in a second.
Yeah, I can guess why, but I do blame Biden for prolonging this in the sense that, and Western Europe too. I think Western Europe plus Biden bought into this sort of delusion of, if we just give enough armaments to Ukraine, somehow, some way, this country is going to topple Russia, and that's going to be a good thing. And I personally, I'm someone who, I want peace in the world. I'm anti-war, and defeating Russia is not something that is going to balance out planet Earth. It's not, and this is something that the Cold Warriors even understood. It's why, for all for Vietnam, for all these conflicts, Russia and the U.S., both the Soviets and the Americans, understood we can't come into direct conflict. It is deeply dangerous for the United States government and the Soviet Union to directly fight each other. And in this war, Russia-Ukraine, we get closer and closer to a direct U.S.-Russia conflict, and that is devastating. And I fear nuclear escalation. That's something I give Trump and sort of the Trump wing credit for. For whatever reason, they seem to openly care about this. I don't really hear this on the Democratic side. We cannot climb that nuclear ladder. There's a lot of weaponry on both sides. There are possibilities for real tragedies, and so I personally think we need to find a way to de-escalate and get to a peace situation. I think the U.S. and Western Europe can do it, but they've got to see reality in front of them and to get Zelensky in the room. Listen, Zelensky, enough. You fought hard. Listen, Putin,
comedian.
We've got to get it. Yeah, get the showman in the room, and it'll happen at some point, but it's not happening yet. Yeah.
The only question will be, and then I'll tell you why I blame Biden.
Yeah.
I guess. So the question will be, as Kissinger had said before he died, that he thought whatever Ukraine was left with should be allowed to join NATO.
Yeah.
I would like to see that outcome as well, but I have no idea how if that's possible.
Yeah.
The reason I blame Biden, when I say blame Biden, I don't presume to say it would have never happened except for Biden, but I think there's a significant less than zero chance that if he had behaved differently, maybe it wouldn't have happened. You don't know. And the headline is, the zoomed out version is that he communicated to the world and to Putin that there was no chance that America was going to do anything if you take Ukraine.
Mm.
He did it specifically by speaking one time when he said, well, if it's a minor incursion, well, it might be okay with it. But more importantly than that, I think Harris said this too, he said, and if it's a major incursion, well, you're going to have some economic sanctions.
Mm-hmm.
Which to Putin's ear was, well, if all I have to worry about is economic sanctions, I'm cool with that.
No.
So that was essentially telling him right this way, as opposed to saying, first of all, I don't know what could have been done in terms of actually putting tripwires of some sort there that Putin would have had to worry about triggering something with America, or by saying, if you go in here, we're going to arm these people to the teeth.
Yeah.
We're going to, essentially everything we did.
Yeah.
Like, why not tell them up front that's what we're going to do, right? Now, maybe that wouldn't have worked.
Yeah.
But Putin didn't even have to go through that stressful decision.
If he knew this was going to be such a slog, perhaps.
Yeah, maybe he would have come to some compromise. And then finally, the way they pulled out of Afghanistan, I know people don't like to admit this, but it is provocative to see the United States of America run out of a country with its tail between its legs.
Yeah.
It emboldens our enemies. So that's why I blame him.
Right.
Having said all that, am I sure it wouldn't have happened anyway? No.
Right.
How could I be sure?
Yeah. Yeah. No.
He really wanted Ukraine for sure.
I look, Biden in Afghanistan, it was sort of an impossible situation where no president could unwind it and end it. And
but it wasn't urgent. They didn't have to do it like that.
But what better way could there have been to leave Afghanistan? I guess that's the question. Was there a good, safe, normal way to leave? I'm not sure. I don't know if there was.
Don't leave all those weapons there.
Well, he was told apparently now to do it that way. The kind of notion listen, I don't like the Democrats, not because of their tax policy. When you hear like the Secretary of State say things like, well, if the Taliban want to be considered in the company of polite nations,
Yeah.
they will can be concerned about the way they're perceived by the rest of the world. They were saying things like this.
Yeah.
These are idiots. The Taliban does not give a shit about being respected among the community of nations, right?
Yeah.
And sure enough, the behavior we've seen since then, they're right back to terrorizing
Yeah.
women. But they really believe this stuff, and they're impervious to updating their worldview, no matter how many times it proves bankrupt.
Yeah, well, I think that's more the foreign policy establishment than just Democrats. I think you're sort of describing the Washington blob hive mind. It seems like, which goes across party.
But maybe that
Yeah.
that worldview.
Yeah, Washington. Foreign
mean-
I mean, they're
policy
saying the same thing about
consensus.
Hania now, though, is that, he was moderate in his position. And I mean, you're seeing this language about this guy who.
Well, what you are seeing is people say that Netanyahu did this in order to not have to agree to a hostage deal. This, to me, is madness. They did not have to risk a regional conflict to simply not agree to the ceasefire deal. Like, I'm open to the idea that Netanyahu, because he's afraid of going to jail, whatever it is dragging his feet on the sea. I don't believe that, but I'm open to that because the idea that he would risk a Tel Aviv on fire, this is just crazy talk. But and when you used to ask people, what do you want them to do in Gaza? You don't like people would say, well, they should do targeted assassinations. They say, well, now they're doing targeted assassination. Well, I don't like the targeted assassination. Well, then what can they do? Well, they could just give up. Anyway,
Right.
we have to go. I like you very much.
I had a lot of fun.
And,
what are you doing in Japan?
Just a family vacation.
Japan? Have you been there before?
Never been there before.
Oh, it's wonderful. I went there last year. It's my favorite place to go. It's great. Where are you going?
We have a trip planner we're going to Tokyo and
Yep.
Kyoto and
Yep.
what are the other?
Osaka is
Osaka,
near Kyoto. Yeah. Got to take the Shinkansen, take the bullet train.
Yeah, we're taking the bullet train. We're going to go to some anime things. How old are you?
34.
Yeah, you don't know this yet. But when you hit your 60s, all of a sudden, like, whomp, you start saying, fuck it. I need to start doing whatever I want, whenever I want to
Yeah,
do.
yeah,
And I was always actually kind of like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I did not ever deny myself much, but now I'm tripling it. Like anything
Yeah.
I want to do, I'm like, fuck it, we're going.
You're going to think America. Well, you may think America's a failed state already, but you're
No, I don't.
seeing the. Well, then you'll see the Japanese infrastructure, and you will feel at least temporarily that America is
But
profoundly far behind.
I did take the TGV in France, and I know there's reasons we don't have it here, but it is a wonderful thing.
Yeah, yeah.
When it's not being sabotaged.
Yeah.
To not have to deal with airports and to just.
Yes, I mean that's you'll the Japanese the metro in Tokyo and Osaka and the bullet trains. You will feel you live in the future and we live somewhere many decades in the past. Japan has many problems, but on the infrastructure they are a century ahead of. In 1 century from now, I don't know if we will be there. Sadly.
There are certain cultures that can have nice things.
Yeah.
When you don't have to worry. Well, you don't have to worry about vandalism. You don't have to worry about shoplifting. You don't have to worry. You don't have to worry about graffiti.
Well, I'm just going beyond to the literal the speed and the like if you had a Japanese style subway system in New York, you would have subway lines going literally to every part of the city. It wouldn't take you an hour and a half to go from Brooklyn to Queens. It'd just be like there'd be a grid and you can literally go anywhere, and you'd be taking high-speed trains to Washington D.C. in like
It's
30
fairly
40 minutes.
inexcusable that doesn't exist
Yeah,
here.
that if it was in Japan, like you'd be rocketing on trains like, up and down the Northeast corridor at like.
I get what you're saying.
Philly would be a 30-minute commute with a bullet train.
But
yeah.
somehow it is an expression of their culture that has its pluses and minuses. I mean, but it's
That's maybe true in the cleanliness part, but on the infrastructure, it is they prioritize it. Also, their government, their structure. I think America, one problem we have is we've a lot of layers of local, federal, regional governments that really gum up the works, for lack of a better term. Whereas in Japan, these sort of centralized bureaucracies, they can decide, we're doing this project, this timeline, spending money, prioritizing.
in
it,
Los
and they go
Angeles
and do
decide
it.
to do some kind of.
Well, it's still
As I-
that's a great
billions of
example.
dollars.
As I understand it, the main.
Yeah. Yeah.
Other than the fact that our population is not as dense as Japan, one of the
Yeah.
main reasons we don't have bullet trains is because it's just the process of buying up land is so cumbersome. All the legal issues.
We do have much more. It's true. Zoning hurdles. Yes. So someone in Japan, an American who speaks Japanese, told me too. One underrated reason we don't have bullet trains is that the airline industry would not want it and would not cooperate. Whereas in Japan, there's sort of this interesting synergy between the airlines and the bullet trains. And
we have to go.
We have to go.
But for next time, or even for an article or to talk privately, I am incensed by, and this is on the right now. For years, I never considered right-wing anti-Semitism as something to worry about. I no longer feel that way. And this, and it even includes with JD Vance, this tolerance and good feeling towards Alex Jones, Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, that whole mix of people.
Yeah.
And it's not just about Jews who are undermining the notion of truth and spreading conspiracy theories into the mainstream is so, in my opinion, so dangerous for America. And it's being tolerated in a way that that really disturbs me.
Yeah.
I like to talk about that. Or
like next time.
Something should be written about that.
Yeah.
I mean, Alex Jones is out there saying
maybe Noam Dworman should be the one that writes it.
Alex Jones is out there saying that the Jews killed John F. Kennedy. And then Tucker Carlson is saying that Alex Jones is a supernatural prophet. Tucker Carlson is sitting at the Republican convention.
Yeah.
And Tucker Carlson says that the United States government has UFOs who are really soldiers of Satan.
Yeah.
And then and his tentacles all around.
Yeah.
You know, it's important for a nation to have a sense for what can and can't be true, because if you think that anything can be true, it undermines your faith in anything. And Trump has his own partners with the election denial, but I actually think that's a different thing. That's just him trying to cheat. Anyway, this conspiracy theories.
Well, I do have somewhat of a soft spot for Candace Owens because we went to the same high school, albeit several years apart.
She says Macron's wife is a man.
Anyway.
You saw that?
No.
She's out of control.
Yes,
she really is.
But she's not treated like the supermarket aisle, like Weekly World News. Yeah. She is joined at the hip with people who are sitting one chair away from the president of the United States, or the former president of the United States at Republican convention. This is not okay. All right. Good night, everybody.
All right. That was fun.
A huge thanks to Sheath Underwear for sponsoring the show. And don't forget to head to sheathunderwear.com/seller and use code SELLER today to get 20% off your first order. Support the show and support your balls with Sheath.